Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be looking at Shopify stock and whether I think it is a buy, a hold or a sell at the moment. So if you don't know what Shopify is, I've done a more detailed analysis on the actual business before, so I'll leave a link to that up there if you want to check that out. It's one of my first videos, so go easy on me if you're watching that. But in today's video I just want to run through why you might be interested in buying Shopify stock and why you might be interested in selling Shopify stock. So I'll run through the bull and the bear points to the current stock price, and at the end I'll give you my final thoughts on whether Shopify is a buy, hold or sell at these elevated prices. So because of the COVID-19 situation, Shopify has increased dramatically because they're getting more sales at the moment because the transition to online e-commerce has somewhat being accelerated because of the COVID-19 situation. Okay, with all that said, let's get straight into the video. Okay, I'll just quickly run through my history with Shopify stock. So I first bought Shopify stock after using the platform, and I just thought it was an amazing platform. It was so good for selling and setting up my business a couple of years ago. So I didn't really dig into the company too much. I didn't do my due research, and I just bought a few shares or whatever, and straight away the stock price doubled after like a month, and I was like, oh my god. So I decided to take some profits, and because I didn't really know that much about the stock price, I was like, okay, this is probably just kind of an erratic jump. So I sold, and of course the stock price kept going up and up and up. So now I've just held on to the shares that I had, and they've increased a lot. So now I'm looking at Shopify, and it's run up so much recently. I'll throw up a stock chart here for you to see. But yeah, it's run up so much recently because of the COVID-19 situation somewhat benefiting them. So now I decided to really look into the business and to come to a decision on whether I should really sell some of my shares and whether or not Shopify is entering a bubble at the moment at these prices, because it's kind of getting a bit crazy now. It was overvalued when I bought it, and now it's really overvalued on any technical front. Like, any smart investor would look at this stock and be like, no, this is crazy that you're buying this stock right now. But we'll run through whether all the great points about Shopify and how potentially it is overvalued, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. So Shopify makes money. Say I'm a merchant, I want to sell something. I set up a Shopify store and my customers buy from me. Shopify get a cut of every sale that I make on my website that's hosted and run by Shopify, and I also pay a subscription fee to use Shopify service. So there's two main revenue streams for Shopify: a transaction fee for every sale that a merchant makes from a customer, as well as the subscription that the merchant pays to Shopify to use the Shopify platform. Since the COVID-19 situation, obviously online sales have taken a bit of an increase, because no one can go and buy stuff in physical brick and mortar sales. So a lot of the brick and mortar sales are transitioning to Shopify when maybe it would have taken them longer to do that in the past. It's kind of accelerated their move from brick and mortar to Shopify, so now they have two potential ways that they can sell to their customers, and Shopify is the obvious choice for a brick and mortar store to do that. So their quarter-over-quarter growth in new additions to new merchants on the Shopify platform was 60%. So it's not there's 60% more merchants in total. It's that, say there was 100 new merchants per day last quarter. Now there's 160 new merchants per day this quarter. So that's obviously great growth for Shopify. On top of that, overall on their platform, the merchants are selling 8% more. So there's 8% more sales being made through the Shopify platform. So Shopify obviously are getting the small cut from each of those sales. So there are increases overall on the platform for Shopify. So that's why, since their earnings report, the stock price has really been driving up. So I'll just continue running through all the bullet points, and then we'll go through whether Shopify is actually overvalued. So Shopify has been growing their revenues at 50% a year for the last number of years. So I just extrapolated it out. Their revenue at the moment is just under 2 billion. So for them, their current market cap is 100 billion. So for them to have a fair market cap, we kind of want a price to sales ratio of 1. So for them to grow into their current market cap, which is 90 billion, they would need 50% growth for the next 10 years to have revenue of 100 billion. So you kind of have to come up with your own analysis on whether you think that's possible or even plausible. So the current revenue is 2 billion, and to get it to a revenue of 100 billion would take 10 years of 50% growth. So that's just a number I calculated for you. So yeah, Shopify are growing fast and will continue to grow fast. But is this current stock price too high? So their gross profit is pretty good. It's almost 40%. However, their earnings is negligible because they're reinvesting everything into the business. So Shopify have a very good balance sheet, and I'll talk in a minute about why their balance sheet is so good, where they got all their cash. But their balance sheet is excellent. They have 3 billion in cash and short-term investments. And yeah, basically they got most of that cash from selling shares. So they're selling Shopify shares. Maybe a bad indication that maybe they think the stock price was overvalued. They started selling at $137, $154, and $300. So the current stock price is almost $800. So it's pretty likely that they'll sell some more shares at these elevated prices, continue selling shares to strengthen their balance sheet so they can reinvest that money. So you kind of have to work out for yourself whether that's a good thing or a bad thing that they're selling shares. If they're selling shares, that money can be used to reinvest and grow the business potentially, but it also dilutes the value of your shares that you own. So Shopify are really committed to making the platform excellent for merchants, because the more a merchant sells on their platform and the easier it is for a merchant, the more money Shopify makes. So they're committed to making it really easy for merchants to sell stuff through the Shopify platform. So they're continually adding really great new features. So now you have Shopify email. So that's kind of like MailChimp, making it really integrated and easy to send out email marketing campaigns. They've also added Shopify Capital. So a merchant like me can take out a loan directly from Shopify if I need money to have products or whatever, to buy new products or something like that. So that's another potential revenue stream for Shopify in the future. And finally, Shopify are trying to become like the next Amazon. So they're building out, they're just starting all this stuff now, the last couple of years that I've been reading. So these are all really interesting and great points for Shopify's future potential. But they want to be like the next Amazon. So they're building out fulfillment centers throughout the world. So they've started in the US and Canada, having their own proprietary fulfillment centers where merchants can send their products for Shopify to fulfill the products for them. So to send the products to the customer. So I get my products from China, I put them into a Shopify fulfillment center, and then Shopify will send out those products whenever I get a sale. And they also have a chat feature. They've just added a chat feature. So if I'm a merchant, I can a customer can real-time chat with me on the Shopify website if I want, which is a great feature. So they're just copying all the best apps that Shopify had before. Now Shopify are taking all those ideas and making them themselves for their merchants. So yeah, as I mentioned, they have an excellent balance sheet, very, very little debt and quite a lot of cash. So 3 billion cash and like a couple of 100 million in debt. So almost negligible. Okay, so let's run through why you might think Shopify is overvalued. Well, Shopify's price to earnings ratio is absolutely astronomical. It's not even worth discussing because it's like 5,000. It actually is 5,000 at the moment, which is the highest price to earnings ratio I've ever seen. However, it's not really fair or wise to look at a price to earnings ratio of such a fast growing company that's reinvesting all its earnings. So I think for Shopify, we really have to look at the price to sales ratio to get a more accurate picture on whether the stock is overvalued or not. So the trailing price to sales ratio at the moment is 40. So it's at an all-time high. Usually it hovers around 20, which is also extremely high. So don't get me wrong, it is compared to every other stock in the stock market, it is extremely expensive. It's probably the most expensive stock I've ever seen since like the cannabis bubble that we had in the last couple of years. But yeah, it's really expensive, this stock. So I might throw up a comparison for Amazon and Tesla of their previous price to sales ratio, just so you can get a picture of what an average fast growing company with huge potential, what their price to sales ratio were previously. Okay, so for the last number of years, Amazon's price to sales ratio has never been higher than 5, and Shopify's price to sales ratio has never been less than 5. So even compared to Amazon, it's really expensive in a price to sales metric. Tesla at one point reached a price to sales ratio of 20 back in like 2013, but its average price to sales ratio is about 5 or 6. So Shopify's average price to sales ratio being 20, that's one indication that it's really expensive, when you think that Amazon was always a really expensive stock because it had such huge growth. Similarly with Tesla, always had a really high price to sales ratio, a really expensive stock, but still nothing in comparison to Shopify. So that's why I'm reevaluating Shopify and thinking, okay, is the stock getting a bit out of hand now? Is the stock price way too high at the moment? So yeah, as I mentioned, Shopify have been selling shares all the way since $150 to, yeah, it's good that they're strengthening their balance sheet. It also kind of means that they think the stock price is a little bit, it kind of indicates that they think that the stock price might be a little bit overvalued. So I don't generally like to see that. Like even Tesla sold shares at 800, which was probably which was a great idea in retrospect. But if Shopify have been selling shares at $150, $300, and $137, it's like they're gonna sell more shares at $800. Another metric I like to look at is the amount of stock held by insiders, which is for Shopify 0.4%, which is really low. I like to see about 5% at least for a company. So all the insiders are thinking, okay, the stock is a little bit too crazy. So only 0.4 is held by insiders. So that's another factor, another kind of warning sign that this stock price might be a little bit in a bubble territory. Another reason I think Shopify stock is so overvalued and so expensive is because the people who know about Shopify are kind of business-minded people, are kind of investing people anyway. They're people who are starting businesses or young entrepreneurs trying to drop ship online. So all these kind of people who are really interested in making money, they go out, they use the platform, think it's amazing, and then, which it is an amazing platform, don't get me wrong, it's an absolutely wonderful company, but yeah, they notice this and then they're like, okay, just like I did, they go and buy the stock. So that's one reason why I think the stock price has really been elevated, because the kind of people who know about the company are the kind of people who want to, make their money grow. So it's not like your average Joe who's heard of Shopify or has used Shopify. And just finally, I wanted to say that I think the boost in COVID revenue won't last forever. I think it has brought on a wave of new customers, but once brick and mortar stores open back up, the Shopify sales, those 8% of extra sales that they're making, that won't be sustainable in my opinion. So I think after the end of the COVID-19 situation, Shopify sales will take a little bit of a hit, and maybe that will bring Shopify stock back down to more reasonable prices, because it's obviously absolutely crazy priced at the moment. So finally, what am I doing in regards to Shopify? Well, you might have guessed I'm really thinking about selling some of my shares. So currently the stock price is $750. I think if it hits $800, that will give it a market cap pretty close to $100 billion. And I really don't think Shopify has the right to be a $100 billion company at the moment. So I think there's two resistance levels coming up, just like human resistance levels. So there's a $100 billion resistance level coming up, as well as the $1,000 price point for one share of Shopify stock. So I think those two levels would be very difficult to break for Shopify stock. So I'm going to try and cash in a little bit earlier than those levels. So at $800, I'm going to sell. What I'm planning on selling is 25% of my shares. So I'm not going to sell all my shares because I got burned with Shopify doing that before. I really like Shopify for the long term. It's an absolutely amazing company. It has enormous potential, but being a $100 billion company at the moment, we're earning $2 billion in revenue is crazy in my opinion. So I'm not gonna, like, selling is always much harder than buying. Selling at the right time is always harder than buying at the right time. But so that's why I'm only selling 25%, just taking a little bit of profit and keeping the majority for the long term. So that's what I'm doing in regards to Shopify. It's one of the harder decisions that I've ever made in the stock market, in investing at all. So that's what I'm doing. I'd really like to know your opinions on what you would do if you had shares in Shopify. Personally, I would not be interested in buying Shopify at these prices. I think it's a little bit crazy. So, but everyone thinks differently. Like, Shopify probably will be worth a few $100 billion in the future unless something goes wrong. Like, they should be fairly priced at those levels in 10-20 years. However, I think the growth there's just too much hype in it at the moment. It's just too high right now for the amount of money that they're making now. I think it's just a bit too crazy. So for those reasons, I'm selling a small portion of my shares. So please let me know what you're doing in regards to Shopify. If you enjoyed the video, I'd hugely appreciate a thumbs up. An interesting video coming up next on Virgin Galactic space. So if you're interested in seeing that one, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I really hope you learned something, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers.